Today is Thursday, January 12th, 2023, and this is a video about the pickle conspiracy. And let's just get right into it. Who here watching this video knew that dill pickles, your standard dill pickle, is supposed to be a fermented food? It's supposed to get sour through a natural fermentation process. That's your standard pickling, is not traditionally done with you just put it in something very sour and then it makes it sour. It's supposed to be a natural process, and it's way better for you. It's a probiotic. It to naturally ferment things, to let something go sour naturally, you're encouraging the growth of good bacteria, and you're not just taking something and dunking it in a sour solution and making it sour that way. So who already knew that your standard dill pickle, it's supposed to be a fermented food, like kimchi. Kimchi's fermented, certain pickled cabbage things are traditionally fermented, and this is the real pickle. The pickle conspiracy is that pickling is supposed to be fermentation, not dunking something in vinegar, making it sour. And the process is pretty simple. I've actually started doing this. This is like a new culinary thing that I'm trying out. And I would say cooking is one of my hobbies, but it's just something that you need to do. If you're not going to eat processed crap all the time, you need to learn how to cook, or hopefully have somebody in your family who cooks. And cooking, like every aspect of life, typically the general thing that people do and the easy option is going to be corrupted in some way, and it's going to be gate kept and takes a little bit of effort on your part to find the real truth, find the right way to do things. So just what I'm thinking of is the difference between the way that we should be naturally preserving foods and just think the mindless 1950s housewife filling their pantry with all these canned goods. I'm going to get into the specifics of canned versus fermented in a bit. But in general, it just fits this theme of the right way to do stuff is not the way that most people do it, and you need to do your own research if you're going to figure out the best way to do things. If you just follow what everybody else does and what the uh, standard procedure is here on Earth, and if you do what the TV tells you to do, that's not the best thing. And so something I want to say about this though is that fermentation is really easy. It's so easy. Canning is very complicated, and this is like another thing that fits the MO. They'll they make something seem really complicated. In most people's minds, preserving food is extremely complicated, but this particular method of fermenting foods, it's very easy actually and not dangerous, whereas canning is extremely complicated and can be potentially deadly. So I think of this fermentation pickling method as, it just seems godly to me. It's like this is the way that God intended for things to be preserved. Whereas canning is more of like magic. You're verging on magic territory, and that's why you get these dangerous side effects, potentially like botulism. Whereas that's not a thing in fermentation. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Numbers chapter 11, verse 5. We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. We can imagine that people in times past were doing similar things. This is probably a major preservation method that they were using in the time. Just because the Bible doesn't mention how they were pickling things, I think it's pretty safe to say that this method, lacto fermentation, the word lacto here, it has to do with lactic acid, not with dairy products. I think it's pretty safe to say that people have been doing this since the beginning of time to preserve food. This just seems like the most natural, obvious, God-given way. And it's amazing. The things like everything that needs to be there for this process is already there. This is one of those, I don't remember it. It's like they started talking about this at some point, about the importance of the bacteria is very important to us. The bacteria that's in our gut, on our skin, all around us. There's been kind of a slow transition from the Victorian times where they're like, oh, there's these microscopic things, and they're telling people that they're spooky and going to get you sick. I just think of this interesting slow transition from when they when they first introduced the idea of tiny little creatures, bacteria and stuff in the Victorian times, to today where we're getting closer to the truth now, where we understand that it all works together. It's all working together. Bacteria aren't this like, it's not this oogie boogie thing. They're natural parts of us, and they cover everything, and they're really beneficial a lot of times. Anyways, what I'm getting at is it it just seems godly in the way that it's all there, it's all natural. You literally cover a food with a brine, and the good bacteria that's there already on the food just starts going into overdrive and preserves the food. It's like, if you believe in just randomness, I don't know how you explain stuff like this in life, where it's like you can just grab something off the ground, cover it with salt water, and it naturally preserves itself. God made this place so amazing with so many interesting features like this. This is just a brilliant feature of Earth that God created for us to preserve food. And a good friend actually brought up a good point that this is a process for preservation of food, and nowadays they really do push the importance of gut bacteria and this relationship between animal organisms and kind of the smaller things that are inside of us. Um, but anyways, to get specifically to winter, in winter, maybe we need a lot more of that gut microbe, good ferment bacteria. And so this is like, naturally, God is giving us a way to supplement our bodies in a way that we should be in the winter. I just thought that was a good idea that my friend had. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 29. Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. This just reminds me exactly of this lacto-fermentation method. It just, to me, it seems like an obvious, aha, this is the way that God intended for us to preserve food. Or at least one of the... this place is amazing, and there's not only just one answer. There's going to be other good ways to preserve food. I'm just saying, in contrast to canning, which is more of like an invention, I would call canning, pressure canning, kind of like you're getting towards man's invention at that point, and you're kind of walking away from the uprightness of God and simplicity. He already made things for you. You don't have to go start making metal in a cylinder and then doing, that's like too much stuff. There's better ways. Lactofermentation remains more the nutritional value of food than canning. Canning and lactofermentation do not have the same effect on nutrients and vitamins. With canning, nutrients and vitamins are reduced during the sterilization of the jars. So that's a big difference. And this is actually the reason. Here I'll just explain the whole botulism thing. And talking about microbes and all that. So, and this actually really, it makes me so annoyed, because on YouTube, I was looking up some YouTube videos on lactofermentation, and you can spot the phonies a mile away, because they'll have flashy production values, and they'll be talking about lactofermentation, but then they bring up botulism as if botulism's a risk. So they're proving that they know nothing about what they're talking about. Botulism is not a risk for lactofermentation, and let's explain why. So botulism is everywhere. Botulism is all over the place. It's just that it normally is in such low numbers that it's not going to do anything to you, and there's plenty of other microbes around that keep it under control. And so when you're doing lactofermentation, you're encouraging the growth of good microbes. So that's why botulism doesn't have a chance. And in this process of encouraging the good microbes, you're creating an environment that's horrible for botulism. So it's really not a threat. However, when you can, see, this is where you're getting into man's inventions, and you're doing weird things. If you leave it up to God and you leave things natural, there's literally no chance, because the way God made things is in a way that makes sense. And when humans start inventing things, that's when you can start to get in trouble. So let me explain the canning. When you're canning stuff, you kill off a lot, hopefully, when you're doing it correctly, you hope to kill off all the bacteria or all the bad stuff. However, when you have a botulism problem, Botulism survives higher temperature than a lot of other microbes. So what happens in canning is you kill off all of the microbes except for botulism. And now this thing that normally would get trampled out by all the other microbes, it's allowed to run free and grow crazily. And so what botulism poisoning is, it's just you're getting way too much of something that normally is just barely scattered about. This thing that normally is really rare and trampled out by good bacteria and microbes is allowed to grow crazy and create a poison in the can. And that would never happen in lactofermentation. Anyways, let's turn into a science thing. Real science. What is the difference between lactofermentation and pickling? Quick pickles, the most common type of pickle found in grocery stores, are not fermented because they use an acid, such as a vinegar, in their pickling brine. However, lactofermented pickles are fermented because they follow the lactic acid fermentation method, which only uses water and salt in the brine. How nice. Doesn't that, just the simplicity of it brings me straight to God. All you need is salt and water to preserve. And I think of the way that people overcomplicate stuff. There's actually a Bible verse that I was looking for that I couldn't find. And the spirit of the Bible verse that I can't find that I'm looking for is that man often, they overcomplicate and they make the simple complicated very often. And it is a way to just deceive people. There's something that has a really easy answer, and instead of giving you the easy answer, they give you this complicated other thing, and they say, oh, don't worry about it, it's really complicated. Okay, so these are just some verses from Isaiah. I'm going to read them. Isaiah chapter 24, verse 10. The city of confusion is broken down, every house is shut up, that no man may come in. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 3. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt your confusion. I love that verse. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 3. Trusting in the shadow of Egypt. Just some beautiful poetic language. And those will be the ones that I read. I think of people entrusting, when people offload all their responsibilities to modern media and just going to the grocery store and doing, they're trusting in the shadow of Babylon, basically. Because they're just saying, I'm not going to do anything myself. I'm not going to look into anything myself. I'm just going to go along with it and just accept whatever people are giving me. This is an interesting thing about this process. So this is just something I was looking up stuff, pickling. Genesis chapter 50, verse 3. 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those that are embalmed. And then I think that the reason that this got pulled up when I was Google searching is because of the commentary on these verses. Because they were talking about so long the body lay in the pickle. And this is actually where that expression, being in a pickle, because they would put dead bodies in a pickle. In ointment of cedar. It's strange to think. Maybe they were using this method to preserve bodies somehow? I don't know. That it might soak and penetrate thoroughly into it. And so this person says that having laid more than 30 days in such a state, it was delivered. Okay, anyways, there is this in the Bible about pickling. But what I want to talk about really quickly is the connection to baptism. I just pulled up this on baptism: to dip, to immerse, to submerge. This method of preservation, it's like a baptism of the vegetables. How interesting is that? You can preserve these things by baptizing them. And the addition of salt, too. Salt is very important in the Bible. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 15. The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. It is sad, but true, that you have to question everything and you have to do everything yourself. If you just go along with the flow of the system today, the chances that you're getting a good product, that you're doing the better thing, the best thing, is almost zero. And you got to do your own research. So I actually already brought this up. Here's just wrong answers, meaning it alludes to the idea of being as mixed up and disoriented as pickled vegetables in the jar. I was looking into where the expression to be in a pickle, but I already said it. It has to do with the pickling dead bodies. So these were wrong, but then this This is getting closer to it. Bon Appetit was closer to the idea to sit in the pickle brine, which is an unpleasant place to sit. But I think more specifically, it's where they would do this with dead bodies, I believe. So here's my little project. You take vegetables and you submerge them in salt water, and that's it. You got to make sure that the salt concentration's right. So go research this if you want to. It's just a fun little culinary project. And it also reminds me of this, which kind of went a little viral on YouTube, and it's another thing. It reminds me of homesteading and stuff like that. Why is this a recent topic? It's like God is preparing people for what's going to come. And this is another conspiracy. The whole idea of, why didn't they teach us about this stuff in biology class? How to grow our own food, how to take vegetable scraps and propagate it and start growing a new plant from it. And the conspiracy aspect of this is that a lot of times produce companies, farmers, they purposefully tamper their product so that you as the consumer can't propagate it. And I've already spoken enough in this video, so I'm just going to try to flip through stuff and finish this off. It reminds me of weird Monsanto stuff, the legal battles against farmers and trying to grow stuff. Apparently, plants come with tags that try to tell people that they can't propagate it. Propagation. Imagine buying a plant and there's a tag that says propagation prohibited. Ridiculous. Genesis chapter 1 verse 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And I also think this reminds me of God also made all sorts of amazing processes like lactofermentation. Not only did God give us all the plants and animals, and he made earth in such an interesting way and helpful way, and gave us natural methods of preservation, which are as easy as covering it with salt water. And the last little statement that I want to make in this video is this lactofermentation thing, it's used all over the world in what they would call third world countries. And this is one of those black is white, up is down. People in first world countries think that they're so advanced, that they're so smart, just because they're born in a place with access. It's all about access to certain technologies, and that stuff is gatekept and let down on the plebs. Technology is not naturally released on the public, and you're not better than someone because you were born in America and they were born in somewhere else. That doesn't make you better because you were born in a specific location. Anyways, isn't it interesting that what you would call third worlders actually live in a much more natural lifestyle, and they know important facts about life. They know about this fermentation method. In China, it's extremely common for people to have these giant fermentation jars. And this is just like common knowledge. And for all the smarty pants brains and science classes I took over in America, I didn't even know a dill pickle was supposed to be fermented. So I'm just going to read this because I think this is funny. People often use the term third world as shorthand for poor or developing nations. By contrast, wealthier countries such as the United States and the nations of Western Europe are described as being part of the first world. Where did these distinctions come from, and why do we rarely hear about the second world? Could do a whole video on this topic. All of those are good questions. And yeah, what's the difference between a first world and a third world? Even dirt poor countries have the same old world buildings and government buildings that look Greco-Roman and stuff. So what's the difference? Cuba looks just the same as all the other places with these intense government buildings and Greco-Roman stuff. Why is it different? It literally comes down to access and what the NWO decides that it's going to do in these different places. It never comes down to the individual. It's each individual is just placed where they are, and we have to deal with what we're given. You know, America isn't better off than Cuba because like all the smart people were born in America. It's because USA is Babylon, and it's constructed to be this way. But anyways, it just shows you the backwardness. People in America are going to die off like flies when the shit hits the fan and the system goes down and electricity gets shut off and all the distribution systems get shut down. Who's going to die faster, the first world countries or the third world countries? Hope you enjoyed the video. God bless everyone.